I arrived just after sunset. The airport was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just gotten used to terminals where announcements came in 3 languages. There was no welcome sign, no wave through security. Just a heat shimmer rising from the pavement and the quiet sound of wheels over tile. I picked up my own bag. No one was waiting. I hadn't expected anyone. Outside, I rented a truck. Basic model, no upgrades. I asked for a local map at the counter, even though I knew the way. Habit. I drove the 2 hours with the windows cracked, Kansas air thick with heat and grain dust. My uniform was folded beside me, the metal still clipped to the lapel, untouched. I hadn't taken it out of the box since the ceremony. It wasn't for them. I passed the edge of town slowly. The old diner was still there, though the sign had lost a few letters. I didn't stop. I turned down the road that used to lead to my grandfather's property. When I was a kid, the trees leaned in heavy with cotton. Now they looked bare, like they'd given up holding the wind. Then the headlights caught it. A wooden sign, fresh paint, nailed to the post at the property line. Property sold, auction closed. The words didn't make sense at first. I blinked, let the truck idle. Backed up 10 feet and read it again. Still there, still real. No call, no message, no warning. I pulled off the road and parked. Got out slowly. The gravel shifted under my boots, the same kind Grandpa used to rake smooth every Sunday. I stood at the edge of the property and looked at the house I had carried in my head through every deployment. The porch light was on. The driveway was full. Inside, they were moving. I could see the outline of people through the front windows. 2 men lifting a dresser, boxes stacked in the hallway, my mother's kitchen stool overturned by the sink. I walked up the path, boots tracing lines through the dust where old weeds used to grow. The porch creaked. I stepped inside without knocking. Dad sat at the kitchen table, watching something on his phone. His glasses were pushed to the top of his head. The chair beside him, my grandfather's chair, was empty. The cushions were gone. Just bare wood and a strip of felt where the pad used to be. Paul leaned against the fridge, barefoot, a beer in one hand. He nodded once, like he'd seen me yesterday. Jenny stood near the hallway giving directions to a pair of movers lifting Grandma's cedar chest. She didn't stop speaking when she saw me. The air smelled like furniture polish and moving tape. A slow fan turned overhead, stirring heat around the room without moving it out. Nobody looked surprised. "Where's Grandpa's safe?" I asked. My voice was steady. Jenny didn't answer. She was looking at a clipboard. I tried again, lower. "What's happening?" Dad looked up from his phone. His voice was flat. "Auction. It was time." Jenny pulled a roll of tape from her pocket. "We already took what we needed. You can take what's left." That was all. No welcome back. No word about the medal. No mention of the ceremony. No mention of the name they'd read aloud while the president stood inches from my shoulder. No acknowledgement of the folded flag, the 6 years overseas, or the letters I'd sent from countries too small to find on a map. Just what's left. As if my grandfather's life had been sorted into piles. As if I were a distant relative who'd missed the funeral and arrived too late to claim a plate of food. As if I hadn't slept under this roof for 16 years, hadn't spent summers hauling wood, winters fixing pipes, Sundays listening to stories about the history of this land and the price of loyalty. I didn't sit. Paul kept his eyes on the floor. Jenny barked something at the movers. They were to wrap the chest more tightly. It was going in her storage unit. Dad reached for his glass. The ice had melted. He swirled it, then set it down. The noise was louder than it needed to be. I stood still for a long time. Not for effect, just listening. To the sound of boots on old wood, to the quiet of a place that no longer recognized me. I turned and walked down the hall. The rooms were empty. My bedroom door was open, but the walls were bare. The closet was open too. The shelves had been stripped. Just one wire hanger left, spinning slowly like it had been disturbed seconds before I arrived. I stepped into my grandfather's room last. It still smelled faintly of cedar and old wool. But the safe, the one behind the closet panel, was gone. The carpet had been disturbed. They hadn't even tried to hide it. I came back to the kitchen. "Where's the safe?" I asked again. This time I was looking at Jenny. She glanced at Dad. He took it. After the funeral. Dad didn't deny it. I stood there, the heat pressing in like an old hand on the back of my neck, the kind of heat that doesn't let you think clearly. "Why didn't anyone call me?" Paul shrugged. "You were overseas." "I'm not now." "Yeah, well," Jenny said, writing something on her clipboard. "Things moved fast." I looked around the room. The walls, the chipped counter, the scuffed floor where my dog used to scratch after meals. This was the house I'd kept in my mind through sandstorms and surgeries. The image I held when the generator cut out and the only light left came from burning trucks outside the fence. This was the house that steadied me. And now it was nothing but a closing file. I nodded once, a single breath in. Then I turned and walked out. Back down the steps, past the sign, back to the truck. The door shut with a quiet finality. I didn't drive right away. I sat there, engine humming, hands on the wheel. I thought about Grandpa's voice, the way he used to say, "Paper tells the truth, even when people don't." I remembered how he kept receipts from the 80s, how he wrote dates on paint cans, how every cabinet was labeled with tape and ink. He once told me, "I don't trust memory. I trust records." So where were the records now? Where was the will? Where was the plan? The house had changed. The story had changed. But I hadn't. I was still the one who cleaned wounds in the dark, the one who held breath steady when bullets cracked through the silence. They didn't expect me to ask questions. They didn't think I'd come home. They thought I was just a medic, just away too long, just strong enough to leave out. They forgot who raised me. And I hadn't. I didn't go back to the hotel that night. I slept in the truck, parked behind the old community center near the edge of town. No one patrolled there anymore. The security light buzzed overhead, dim yellow. I kept my boots on, one hand near the glove box, the metal still boxed beside me. I wasn't afraid. I just didn't want to be inside four walls I didn't trust. At dawn, I rinsed my face in the restroom sink, used paper towels to pat it dry, and braided my hair the way I had in the field. Tight, simple, secure. By 8, I was waiting outside the county records office with a styrofoam cup of burnt coffee. The clerk unlocked the door 2 minutes late and didn't look up when I stepped in. She wore a navy cardigan and a name tag that had been laminated too long ago. Her desk was cluttered with sticky notes and a half-eaten granola bar. "I need probate filings for Clyde Hayward," I said, giving my grandfather's full name, calm and clear. She didn't flinch. She tapped a few keys, looked down, then disappeared into the back. She returned with a folder thin enough to fold in half. Too thin. She slid it across the counter like it was nothing. I opened it standing there, scanned the dates. Filed 2 days before his death. Filed by my father. Jenny listed as witness. No trust, no will, no mention of next of kin beyond the basic form. "Is this all?" I asked. "That's the filing," she said. "That's what we got." I didn't argue, just nodded once, folded the folder shut, and walked out. Back in the truck, I sat still for a long time, long enough for the heat to settle on the windshield and for the engine to tick softly as it cooled. I stared at the courthouse steps, at the cracks in the sidewalk, the flower bed that hadn't been watered. There was no trust on record, but I knew my grandfather. He labeled cords. He backed up receipts in 2 file cabinets. He wrote names in black ink on masking tape and wrapped it around every socket wrench he ever owned. There was no way he left this to chance. I turned the key and drove. Not back to the house. Not yet. Instead, I pulled up to the First Agricultural Bank of Grayville, the one with the faded eagle above the entrance and the bell that rang when you opened the door too hard. Inside, the air was cold and dry, the carpet threadbare in the middle. I asked for Mr. Lowell. He came out slowly, leaning on a cane, still in the same suit he'd worn since I was in high school, brown tweed, one cuff frayed. His face didn't change when he saw me, just a small nod like I'd arrived on time. He guided me to his office. The blinds were drawn halfway. A fan turned in the corner. "I need to ask you something," I said, off record. He nodded once, didn't speak. Did my grandfather have a trust? A pause. Then, yes. I sat back. Was it filed? He looked down. It was withdrawn, the week he passed. How? Power of attorney. I swallowed. My father? Lowell didn't confirm. He didn't have to. He didn't have authority after Grandpa lost capacity. Lowell nodded once, tight. Correct. Then it shouldn't have been processed. No, he said. It shouldn't have. I let the silence settle. Do you have a copy? He hesitated, then opened a drawer, pulled a file, not thick, but careful. He slid it across the desk. I opened it. Grandpa's signature. Dated 3 years prior. Trust in 3 parts. Beneficiaries? Me, Jenny, Paul. Clause. Any changes require joint notification. All decisions require full consent. Oversight by a third-party attorney named in the final page. Everything had been spelled out. The signature page had my grandfather's handwriting. Clean, steady, unmistakable. It was valid, Lowell said, until it was removed. I closed the folder slowly. That night, I returned to the house. I didn't knock. The door was open, the place still in chaos. Movers were gone now, the rooms half empty. Paul sat on the porch, boots propped on the railing. Jenny was in Grandpa's room, boxing up coats. "The safe," I said, without raising my voice. She looked at me. "Dad took it." "When?" "After the funeral." "Where is it?" She shrugged. "Ask him." I nodded. "I will." Back in my truck, I stared at the messages on my phone. Most were nothing. Logistics, reminders. One stood out. Unknown number, unlisted. You're asking the wrong questions. No name, no punctuation. I stared at it for a while. Then I deleted it. I wasn't scared. I'd clamped hands over pulsing arteries while shrapnel tore through tents. I'd waited for helicopters in sandstorms, counting breaths while holding someone's life together with gauze and pressure. I didn't come home for comfort. I came home for clarity. The next morning, I made an appointment. Legal office 1 town over. Small firm, etched name on frosted glass. The attorney was young, smart, too cautious at first. When I laid the trust down, she sat straighter. I showed her the county records. She frowned. This wasn't processed correctly. "No," I said. "It wasn't." "Do you have any record of the assets?" "I have questions," I said, "and places to ask them." I spent the next 3 days in silence, not stillness, motion without noise. I tracked down buyers. I asked polite questions at consignment shops, estate buyers, online auction listings. Some were hostile, some didn't care, but a few. One woman, probably in her 60s, opened her garage and waved me in. "You're the granddaughter," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "I thought you might come." She handed me a blanket, hand-stitched, blue and white, one of Grandma's. "I didn't know," she said. "I bought it thinking it was an estate sale. They said everything was cleared. It wasn't." She nodded. "I'm sorry." Others followed. A man in church slacks brought back Grandpa's toolbox. A former neighbor returned the flag from the porch. Someone left a stack of black and white photos in a box on the front steps. And with each item, the shape of the theft got clearer. Not just of things, of intention, of trust, of truth. I didn't confront Dad yet. I watched, I listened, I took notes. Jenny kept moving boxes. Paul mostly stayed out of sight. He didn't ask questions. He didn't meet my eyes. And the safe never came back. On the 4th day, I went back to the bank. This time, I brought the attorney. Mr. Lowell sat with both hands folded on the desk. He looked tired, but firm. "She has authority now," the attorney said. "We're freezing the estate." He nodded. "I need transaction logs," I said. He passed me a sheet. Transfers from Grandpa's account to my father's, 3 days before death. No joint consent, no filings, no attorney notification, just quiet movements in the dark. The attorney circled the dates. "This is a breach." I nodded. "It's a pattern." She looked up at me. "Do you want to press this?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of the sign at the gate, the dust on the porch, the way Jenny had said, "You can take what's left." "Yes," I said, but not with anger. Then how? With precision. We filed an injunction the next morning. 2 hours later, Jenny's voice rang through my voicemail, sharp, accusing. "You think you're better than us now?" I didn't respond. I was documenting, sorting, preparing. Dad hadn't called, but the silence told me more than words. And in that silence, I felt something return. Not comfort, not justice, clarity. I started with the bank statements. Not because they held the worst of it, but because paper doesn't argue. I requested 6 months' worth, had them printed and bound, dates, amounts, destinations. Most of the withdrawals were small, meant to look like expenses, groceries, utilities, upkeep, but I recognized the pattern. One withdrawal every 3 days, right up to the end, always just under the reporting threshold. When I compared it to the trust documents, it was clear. The trust required oversight. It required 3 signatures for changes, 1 from each beneficiary. It had none. The attorney sat across from me, red pen in hand. She underlined quietly, page by page. "This wasn't mismanagement," she said. "It was intentional." She slid a page forward. "Here. This was moved the morning of the funeral." I looked at the timestamp. 8:04 a.m. The service wasn't until noon. Who would have had access? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That afternoon, we requested a temporary freeze on all family accounts connected to my grandfather's name. The judge approved it in under an hour. Notice went out the next day. Dad didn't answer. Jenny's lawyer did. 1 paragraph, stiff and defensive, full of words like misunderstanding and administrative delay. But it didn't stop the calls. People started reaching out. One was the auctioneer. She said she'd been hired last minute, cash deposit, told not to advertise too widely, that the family didn't want publicity. Another was a buyer from 2 towns over, a retired teacher who had purchased a case of old war medals. They said he'd given permission, she told me over the phone, said he wanted them to go to someone who'd appreciate them. He didn't, I said. She didn't argue. "I'll bring them back." And she did. Handed me the box in person, both hands trembling. Inside were 5 medals, each in its case. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, 2 service ribbons, 1 coin I didn't recognize from a base that doesn't exist on maps. All still clean, all still his. One afternoon, I stopped by the storage unit Jenny had rented. The clerk at the front desk looked at me carefully. "Your family?" I didn't answer directly, just held out the paperwork. He scanned it, made a copy, handed it back. Then he passed me a sticky note. "Unit 84, combination code written in thick pen." I drove around the side, waited for a couple to leave, then opened the metal door. Inside, 4 dressers, 2 dining chairs, a grandfather clock wrapped in plastic, and 3 boxes labeled in Jenny's handwriting. Sentimental/sort later. I opened the top box. Inside was the quilt Grandma had stitched the winter after I deployed. Next to it, a jar of buttons she used to collect, tied with the same green ribbon she used for everything. Beneath that, a folded note with my name written in her handwriting. I didn't open it. Not yet. The other boxes held photographs, loose, jumbled. Some were stained. Some had dates written on the back in pencil. I recognized most of the faces. None of them were Jenny's. I took what belonged, left what didn't. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the attorney and laid everything out. Paper, photos, logs, witness statements. It was enough. She filed a motion to reinstate the trust and to retroactively invalidate the withdrawal made under expired power of attorney. The county court date was set for the following week. Word spread faster than we expected. The day before the hearing, a neighbor I hadn't seen in years knocked on the door of the old house. He looked older, but his eyes were kind. "Your grandfather used to say you'd come back," he said. He handed me a tin box, old, dented, with a faded sticker on the lid. He kept this in the attic, said it was private. I found it when I was helping move tools from the shed. Inside were letters, dozens, maybe more, all addressed to my grandmother, postmarked from deployments, labeled in order, tied together in stacks of 10 with string. I opened one. The handwriting was clean, careful, the language simple. In the final lines of the letter, he'd written, "Take care of the land, the stories, and the people," in that order. I set it aside. The next morning, I put on a dark suit, not a uniform, not anything that could be mistaken for ceremony. In court, the judge listened quietly. The courtroom was nearly empty. Jenny sat on one side, arms folded, her lawyer whispering in her ear. Dad was behind her, staring at a crack in the table. Paul didn't come. The attorney laid out the findings: unauthorized account access, unfiled transfers, violations of fiduciary responsibility, misrepresentation of estate assets, breach of trust protocol. She spoke without raising her voice, just facts, printed and filed. The judge asked 2 questions, then signed the order. The trust was reinstated. The estate was returned to protective oversight. All further transfers blocked until full accounting. Jenny stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. Her voice was sharp but controlled. "You think this makes you better?" I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "It makes me accurate." Dad didn't speak. Outside, it was raining lightly, the kind of rain that didn't clean anything, just softened the dirt. I didn't go home right away. I drove out to the edge of the land, Grandpa's land. The fence was still up, the old barn still leaning sideways. The field had gone to seed. I got out and stood there for a long time. There was no sound except the hum of insects and the whisper of wind through tall grass. I walked to the corner where he used to stand in the evenings, where he'd say, "Out here, you don't lie to yourself. The land doesn't let you." I stood in the same spot, hands in my pockets, boots firm in the mud. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just remembered. The next day, people started showing up, quietly, without asking. One brought back a radio Grandpa had kept in the garage. Another left a pie and a folded note that said simply, "Sorry I didn't know." They weren't trying to fix it. They were trying to return something, and I let them. I boxed what needed boxing. I called who needed to be called. I set appointments, requested copies, made logs. That's what stewardship looks like. Not anger, not vengeance, maintenance, boundaries, protection. 2 days later, Jenny's lawyer sent an email requesting mediation. I forwarded it to the attorney with no comment. Paul sent a text that said simply, "I didn't know. I believed him." I didn't reply. Dad called. I let it ring. Then he left a voicemail. "I thought I was keeping peace," he said. "I didn't know how to lead with grief." I listened to it once, then deleted it. The attorney called later that week. "All assets are under control," she said. "Would you like to list the property?" "No," I said. "You want to keep it?" I thought of the letter, the one Grandpa wrote, about the land, the stories, the people. "I want to take care of it," I said. "For now." The attorney paused, then said, "That's allowed." Yes, it was. Because responsibility isn't what people take from you. It's what you choose to carry. And I would carry this, not because I was owed anything, but because it was mine. The rain stopped 2 days after the court ruling. The ground was soft underfoot. I walked the perimeter of the property in silence, boots sinking slightly with each step. The fence line was still intact, though one post had leaned inward, warped by water and time. I marked it for repair. The air smelled the way it did in childhood. Wet wood, rust, cotton. The barn door groaned when I opened it. The inside hadn't changed. Tools still hung in neat rows. A pegboard on the far wall held nails, sandpaper, twine, everything labeled in Grandpa's handwriting. There were no cobwebs, no dust. Someone had kept it clean. I stood in the doorway for a long time, hands in my pockets. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted the quiet. That week, I didn't go into town much. People had begun to talk, not cruelly, just enough. A few nodded when they saw me. One clerk offered me a discount without explanation. I paid full price anyway. Dad came by once. He didn't knock. I saw his truck from the kitchen window and met him at the porch. He stepped out slowly, held his cap in one hand. "I thought I was keeping peace," he said. I didn't answer. He looked down at the gravel, at the spot where the old dog used to lie on hot days. I didn't want to argue with anyone. Your sister said it'd be simple. It was simple, I said, until it wasn't. He nodded. I see that now. We stood there for a minute. I didn't want to hurt anyone, he said. Love without boundaries becomes permission. He looked up at me, startled. Then he nodded again. I'm learning that. Too late. Not too late, I said. Just late. He didn't come inside. I didn't invite him. When he left, he paused at the end of the drive and looked back once. Then he kept going. Jenny sent a message through her lawyer. It was short, defensive. Something about mediation, misunderstanding, family matters. I forwarded it to mine. No reply to Jenny. Nothing more needed. Paul didn't call. He didn't text again. But one evening, I saw his truck parked across from the property line. He didn't get out, just sat there, engine running. When I stepped onto the porch, he drove away. That was enough. The days settled into routine. Mornings, I walked the fields, checked the boundary, noted changes in soil, in moisture, in the way the wind moved over grass that had been flattened by months of silence. Afternoons, I sorted through what had returned. Neighbors brought things in unannounced. Tools, photo albums, blankets, even 2 crates of old canning jars wrapped in newspaper. One woman came with her daughter and left a pair of leather gloves. Grandpa's initials were burned into the inside cuff. I didn't know, she said. I thought it was just an estate sale. It wasn't. I'm sorry. I nodded. She didn't stay long. The church ladies came next, one at a time. Casseroles, mostly. Notes folded inside the foil. He baptized my son in '98. He helped patch our roof after the hailstorm. He used to leave apples on my porch. No note, just a bag with a ribbon. None of them asked questions. They just gave and went. At night, I read the letters. The ones from the attic tin. Grandpa wrote the way he spoke. Plain, direct, careful with words. No embellishment. Each letter ended the same way. Take care of what's left. It matters more than what was lost. On the 10th night, I sat at the dining table. Not the original, but the one someone brought back wrapped in a tarp. A woman who said, with tears in her eyes, I didn't realize it was hers. I placed the ledger beside the salt shaker, opened it. Inside were names, dates, notes. 1974. Sold 3 acres to McIntyre. His boy needed the money for school. 1987. Paid off church roof anonymously. Pastor thinks it was the bank. 1995. Bought back the stone marker from auction. Quietly returned it to cemetery. A record of quiet acts. He hadn't kept these for credit. He'd kept them because care requires remembering. I turned the pages slowly. At the back, one note in different ink, newer. Left things in order. If they don't follow it, make them. If they try to split the land, fight it. It's not pride, it's protection. No signature. Didn't need one. A week later, I had a meeting at the bank. The manager met me at the door. You're not what people expected, he said. No, I said. I'm not. We moved everything into a new trust, not just the land, the house, the remaining assets, protected, structured, irrevocable. The lawyer added a clause requiring full consent of all listed heirs for any sale, any division, any transfer. The only person listed besides me was one name Grandpa had written in his own script beside mine: future caretaker, to be named. Not Jenny, not Paul, not bloodline for its own sake, legacy for merit. On the way out, the bank manager paused. He told me once that you'd be the one to finish things properly. I didn't answer, because it wasn't finished yet. A month passed, then another. Jenny stopped sending letters. Dad sent a birthday card, unsigned. Paul sent a box, no note. Just Grandpa's old radio and a wrench set I hadn't seen in 10 years. I kept the wrench. Donated the rest. I didn't see Linda. Not that I expected to. One Sunday, I drove out to the hill behind the barn. There was a small plaque there now, newly installed. I hadn't ordered it. Someone else had. Clyde Hayward, 1936 to 2023. What lasts is what we take care of. The words were his. Below it, a small wooden bench, clean, unmarked, facing the western field. I sat there for a while. Didn't speak. Didn't think. Not the way people mean it. I just stayed. Watched the light move across the tall grass. Watched the wind shift direction and then settle. Watched the land do what it had always done. Wait. Endure. Recover. And I remembered every moment they'd said I was too strong to be included. Every time they said, "You always figure it out. You don't need help. You're the stable one." They meant it as a dismissal. A way of excusing their absence. They didn't know that steadiness isn't absence of need. It's the presence of responsibility, the willingness to act without applause, to protect without permission, and to finish what others fumble. That was the inheritance, not the property, not the money, the steadiness, and I would hold it. If you've ever come home to find your place erased, if they ever called you too strong to matter, too calm to consult, too steady to deserve a seat at the table, if they ever said you were just a daughter, just away too long, just a pair of quiet hands not worth consulting, know this: asking questions isn't betrayal, setting boundaries isn't cruelty, and defending legacy isn't revenge, it's protection. And protection is what the land remembers, because the land doesn't care what they called you. It remembers what you did. And I'll carry that, like I carried stretchers, like I carried names, like I carried truth, with both hands steady, always steady. If this story struck something quiet in you, you're welcome to share your thoughts. I'll read them carefully. And if you'd like more stories like this, slow, sharp, and true, you're invited to subscribe. No pressure. I'll be here.